Hey guys, my name is Zach. Welcome to the Joy of Hobbying. I think this is our third episode of this little mini series, and on today's show, we're going to work on some dioramas. So we have these little wooden plaques. You can get them at Walmart. They're by Plaid. They're like 50 cents. When you find them, buy a lot of them if you like them. They're really good for dioramas because they're a pain in the butt to get when they go out of stock. So we're going to work on 3 of these today, and I want to see if I can get these little screw or staples off. If not, it's not the end of the world, and I don't want to. Yeah, I think we're going to have to leave the staples there on this one. But yeah, so we're going to make some dioramas, and we're also going to work on the custom Blurrg. This is by Watto Scrapyard. And this is a really nice kit. I've assembled it roughly, but you can see that there's some spots that could use a little bit of filler, could use a little bit of sanding. And because this was a free, I wouldn't say free, this was a sponsored item, he printed it in gold filament. But I think if you order one from him, I think you might be able to choose the filament that you want. But none of it really matters because this is all going to be painted anyways. You can see on the inside of the leg here, there's some stuff that we're going to fill. And to do the filling, we're going to use DAP plastic wood. Now you can certainly use something like Sculpey. This is just what I have, and this is what I'm comfortable with. Essentially, we're going to put on a good amount on each of the crevices. We're going to let it dry. And then this takes a few hours, so probably tomorrow or maybe even next week. Maybe we'll finish this up. We'll do some sanding and we'll do some priming. But yeah, it's a really nice 3D printed Blurrg. And this is 1/12 scale. So this scales with the Black Series. And yeah, it's pretty cool. So I want to get started on the diorama stuff first. And I'm hoping that we can open this glue. If not, that's going to be a really short video. But you can see here I marked off some rectangles, and these rectangles are going to be for these monoliths. I'm finally getting some time to finish these. These are going to be placed on these rectangles, and so I need to make sure that the sand grit texture that we're going to use is not on these rectangles. And I'm doing a third diorama for the Blurrg. It's a really nice little piece here, and I think once I get it painted on the base, I think it's going to look pretty good. So let's try to crack this thing open. And we're using wood glue, and I have a little scrubber here. I have some sticks here, and then I also have some Q-tips just to help me apply this wood filler somewhat accurately. So let's try to crack this stupid glue open. It's been a little bit since I've done a diorama, but I think we got it. And we have a brush for the glue. So yeah, this is going to be a pretty varied episode. For the sand, for the diorama, I use a grit that I've kind of created with different, when you go to the dollar store, they sell different sands, different hobby stores have different grits of sand. And over the years, I've kind of gathered a nice mixed grit. And yeah, so let's start putting some white glue on these little boards here. And I'm just going to start pouring it on, and then we can always brush it in here in a second. So we can be a little heavy-handed here, but we just have to make sure that we don't go on the on our mark. And like I said, we're doing 3 of these, so we'll just get them all. We'll get the glue on each of these right now. Okay, there's number 2. And then for this one, since it's for the Blurrg, we can just put the glue all over, and it's not a big deal. I will probably be either screwing the Blurrg into this base or pinning it, so I'm not too concerned about making like a cutout for the feet. You know, if you were doing that, now's the time to mark that out and and do that. So we're just going to brush this glue on, again, being sure to avoid both the small edge here and then also the other edge. And this is a really nice technique. I've seen a few people on some of the groups selling diorama bases, and they tend to sell for quite a bit of money, like, you know, 20, 30 bucks for a diorama base. And I'm not saying that that's a bad price, but, you know, this is something that if you have, you know, even just the smallest amount of crafting talent that you could do yourself and save yourself a little bit of money, especially if you have a ton of figures that need bases. I'm trying to put some glue back, especially if you have a ton of figures that need bases. This is pretty doable. I think I might have put a little bit too much glue on these bases, but that's all right. We'll just work this around the base, and we'll put it to the side for now. Let's take this base. This one I think definitely has too much glue, but it's okay. I think sometimes I put too little glue, so I wanted to be a little bit more aggressive with the amount that I was putting, but I think I overshot. Someone says that they can't stay and watch, but they wanted to pop in. Let me know who you are so I can address you. And this Blurrg, I think I mentioned it, is by Watto Scrapyard. So Sean makes some really, really cool 3D printed stuff. And definitely hit him up if you need some Blurrgs in your life or any of the other amazing custom head sculpts that he's doing. They're very reasonable, the prices to order the head sculpts. The quality is really good. He is doing a lot of 3D printing. So, you know, I think a lot of these sculpts, he has like quantities of these ready to go. So it's not like you're waiting for some of these, you're not waiting for, you know, a printer to become available in his workshop. So definitely hit him up. And I know the Blurrgs, I think he's making them in 3 3/4 scale and also in 1/12 scale. So there's lots of options there. If you want yourself a Blurrg, you can definitely hit up Sean. He's a good guy. We've been doing business with him for probably, I want to say like 6 months, give or take. And he's always done right by us. So, and he's sponsoring us. So if you like this segment, or if you like the show these past few weeks and these next few months, he's a big part of us being able to continue to record these. So big shout out to Sean. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So normally I'd clean the brush off, but so Danley says hello. Fernando says, are you going to put the Mando on top of it? I don't know. I really like my Mandalorian figure, and I don't know if I want to put him on this. I probably will for a photo, but not you know, not full time. So I have this box here because my wife would kill me if I've got sand and stuff all over the table in the office. So let's see if I can move some stuff around to give you guys a view of what's happening here. Okay, so you can see there's the glued base in there. And essentially, let's see if I can tuck this in. Essentially, we're going to take our sand mixture and we're basically just going to pour it over. And, you know, that's pretty much it. We're just going to get some sand on these bases. And yeah, it's not that exciting, but we're putting sand on a base. So let's kind of shake this around a little bit and do that. And you can see we have a base that has sand on it. Now, of course, some of the edges we're going to touch up. Not now because the sand is still, or the glue is still wet, but we'll touch those up before we add paint. But essentially that's going to be as far as we're going to get on each of these bases today, because like I said, this does need to set for a few hours. But once we paint this base, this texture here, these different grits, are going to allow for really nice dry brushing. And yeah, it ends up looking really nice. So like I said, there's a lot of people that are very talented. They're selling these dioramas for, you know, quite a bit of money. And if you wanted to save yourself some cash, you know, check out this video. And it's really not hard to do this stuff yourself. You just gotta, you know, get some glue, which is like $1, and then you can get sand. Even just if you just wanted one grit, you can get sand for like $1 at the dollar store. So for like $2, you can have yourself a diorama base, and of course you can buy more plaques for like 50 cents to you know, to expand your abilities. So this one, the glue coverage is a little bit better, so we got a pretty nice adhesion on that one. And put that over there, and then we have one more base, and then I'm gonna go run this to the garage, and then we'll start working on the Blurrg. So let's get that last base in here, and we'll tilt it again so you guys can see what's going on. Dan Lee says, is that real sand? Yes, it is real sand. So I've never really seen like a synthetic sand, but this is real sand. And I mentioned a bit earlier, I'm not sure if you heard, but you can get like different grits of sand at hobby stores or like online. They call it ballast, and some of it is used for like model train, specifically like that gray stuff that you see in here. And yeah, I just, you know, pick up different grits and mix them. And, you know, sometimes if you're out and about, you know, pet stores will sell different sands. And just over time, I've accumulated like 8 or 9 different sands and, you know, combine them to make, you know, a very random assortment of grit. And it works pretty good. So let's let me cap this off, and then I'll run this box to the garage so we don't get sand everywhere. And we'll come back, and like I said, we'll start working on the Blurrg. So let's put these bases in here so they can dry. And you can be a little rough with these because, like I said, we are going to touch up with some more glue and some spots of sand later. But yeah, that's pretty much the first step of making a diorama. Specifically a sand diorama. And so we're going to put this away, and then we'll start working on the Blurrg. All right, so we are back. Those are going to dry for a few hours before we can mess with them. So we will not be live at that time, but maybe next Thursday we can. I can touch them up between now and next Thursday, and then we can, you know, we can work on them. So this is, like I mentioned, plasti wood filler, and I've seen people use all kinds of things. Let's see. Yeah, let me grab some gloves real quick, and then we'll start applying this here. All right, so let's we got our gloves on. So Dan, you said you wish Hot Toys would make different variations of their sand base. Yeah, I wish they would too. They're kind of, I don't want to say bland, but you know. So with this, we're basically going to come in here and we're going to start adding some of this wood filler. And essentially what our goal is at the end of it all is to make this whole character seamless. Since it is an animal, we don't want different seams on the animal. And these seams are created because the printer is printing this object in multiple pieces. That may be the design that was submitted to Thingiverse, that may be Sean's modification of the design. For one reason or another, it was printed in multiple sections. So this stuff sands really nicely. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm sure Sculpey would be an excellent thing to do for this part, but I don't have Sculpey and I have this stuff. So for no reason other than I have it and we're using it. And I'm going to be a bit excessive in some parts where the gaps are pretty big. I do want that to fill. And like I said earlier, we can always sand this down. It sands really nicely. So I'm not too concerned if you know, this guy ends up being quite pink after it's all said and done. So that was one piece of the tail. We're going to fill in another piece here. And this stuff does take some time to dry. So today's video, we're only going to be working on this aspect of it. And then, you know, in a future video, we can deal with the painting and sanding and finishing and priming and all that stuff. I think by the time the next video comes up, I'll probably have primed it once. That way we can see where we need to do more work. But for now, I think this is coming along pretty good. This is a plastic print, so the print is a little rougher than the resin, but it's also quite a bit cheaper and quite a bit faster. And since we were going to do all this work on the resin anyways, it makes a lot of sense to print this in plastic. Okay, so that's coming along. So we have this flap here on the bottom. Let me see if I can get a stick to show you. We have this flap here, so we're going to fill this with the filler. And let me angle the camera a little bit this way. So we'll do some filling. And that's coming along pretty good. Yeah, it's remarkable how nice this print is. When I first saw it, I had assumed he had sent me a resin print, and I was like ever so slightly bummed that it was not resin printed. But once I put this together, the kit really fit together beautifully. And I know in the past on Collecting Weekly, I've mentioned the T-Rex model that broke me as a hobby maker, as a modeler. And I was really worried to put this thing together, and I kind of put it off for a few weeks. And once I started, this thing just went together so nice. This was so much nicer than that T-Rex model kit, specifically because the plastic is so sturdy. With that resin one, you have it warping in different directions, and it's just not really a fun thing to build. Like I got no enjoyment out of working with that. And after 2 attempts, I pretty much gave up. So we're doing a little bit more filling here. And there is some texture here I'm trying to preserve. So I'm kind of rubbing, and that's why I have that other brush. The one's like a dishwashing brush. That way I can get in, and if I over fill, I can always come in and kind of scrape some of this off. But yeah, it's coming along really good. And this stuff is obviously generating quite a bit of mess, so we're going to clean that up before we leave today. So let's fill in this ankle here. This one actually, I had dropped it while I was building it, and so the ankle broke a little bit. but the print quality was such that I could do a really easy repair. So it was actually not too bad. And you can see this gap here is quite significant here where my middle finger is. So that's going to require quite a bit of filling to get that. And that's mostly because I had dropped it and a lot of things had shifted and I hadn't noticed before they dried. But that's 100% my fault, not Sean's. Okay, so we're doing some more filling. And this is coming along pretty good. So let me let's get the stick here. I want to make sure we're not overfilling and making these like one big piece. What is going to be one big piece, but I don't want the arms and legs to connect. Okay. And this is coming along really good. And like I said, I'll definitely try to prime this by tonight so we can all see what's going on here. But yeah, this is coming along pretty good. Ian says you can use watered down with some mineralized spirits to paint it in the cracks and seam joints works really well. Yeah, so Dan asked if the filler will cover some texture. It probably will, and that's why I have the, I'm not sure when you commented that, but that's why I have this, ooh, that filled really nicely. That's why I have this brush here. I'm going to go over and try to get some of the excess off like that, just to make sure that, that it doesn't cover up some of that texture. There wasn't a tremendous amount of texture on this model to begin with. I mean, there is texture, but it's not like with that T-Rex model. One of the things that made it so difficult was it was like an ultra textured model. And it's my understanding it was based on the Stan Winston maquettes that they used to film Jurassic Park. So it had like a tremendous amount of texture. And because it had so much texture, just working with it was awful. It was absolutely awful, and the material was not sturdy enough to really, like, essentially you were gluing parts, and like as you were gluing parts, other parts were coming undone, and it was just awful. And obviously I had the knockoff version of the model kit, but even the authentic one, I've heard some horror stories of people that have built it, that it's not particularly a fun model kit to build and or paint. And also one thing, Dan, this is a plastic print, so the detail is maybe a little less than what would be there if there was a if this was a resin print. So case in point here, there's a lot of swirls here because of the convexity of the shoulder. So even though I'm adding this filler and removing maybe some of the texture that would have been there, the overall texture will be more pleasing than that swirl texture. So we are losing some texture in some places and we're gaining some texture in other places, but I think overall the model will be better for us having done this, in my opinion. And I haven't done any actual priming on this yet. And that was something I kind of juggled in my mind, is if I wanted to do a filler primer layer first, but I really wanted to see what I was working with, and I wanted you guys to see some of this. So you can see this is starting to dry here already. It's turning white, and it's really filled in those striations quite nicely. And those are striations that are not intended to be seen on the final finished product. So here we're going into the strap here, and we're gonna just put a little bit there, kind of work it in. And pretty much the rest of this video is just going to be doing this. It's pretty relaxing stuff, actually. The one thing is I want to get some of the dust off real quick. So let me grab a washcloth. We'll clean this table, and then we'll keep working on this Blurrg. All right. And we are back. So I have a little bit of a towel here. I'm just going to go in here and lightly, it's kind of like a little bit of a wet towel. Just going in here and cleaning off some of the excess, just so I can ensure that we're not losing too much detail. But like I said, I think overall the benefit to the model will be such that this will be worth it. And this makes it easier to sand because as we're sanding, we're not needing to sand all the way down to fill those crevices. We can actually sand up to the filler, and that's kind of the whole idea of filler. So let's get back in here with the strap here. And that I actually really don't mind if we lose a lot of that texture because it is just supposed to be like a leather strap, but I do want to get the buckle exposed. So specifically this area here. Okay. And I think that's looking pretty good. Okay, so the next joint we need to fill is this right here, which is the seam that's created from the leg, the arm, and the torso. And we're going to use our stick with some filler primer on it, or filler rather. And we're going to try to wedge this stuff in there. And a lot of this, no one's really ever going to see it, but especially since we're going to glue this guy down to a diorama. But I just want to know that if someone ever did see it, that they could appreciate that this was done. So let's add some of that. And we can always clean this up once it sets. But I do want to have a good foundation for us to work from. And this arm did have a little bit of striation on it, so we're going to put some more filler on there. And this amount of work that we're doing isn't exclusive to Watto's. This is, most things you're going to get like on Etsy are going to, unless they're finished, of course, are going to require some amount of work to get presentable. And that's just the way 3D printing works. It saves you a lot of time, but you do have to sometimes give it some love and some care. So this back here, this I notice is getting a little clogged, the detail. I'm going to come back here and just clean up right here on the edge of the saddle. Just make sure that we're preserving that detail that Sean has given us. And the underside of the saddle here is a bit rough, so I'm going to patch that up as well. And let's add some here. Some of this filler might have been easier to do if we hadn't attached the arms yet, but it's not too bad with the arms. It's just a little bit awkward to deal with. We're also going to start patching the back of this character's right leg with some filler primer. Or I keep saying filler primer with some filler. I'm so used to just using filler primer. This is like, I think with Dean and Seth's Dead Mouse helmets, which Seth, yours is going to be finished soon. I bought so much filler primer and used so much filler primer that the word is like burned in to my brain. It's like a ridiculous amount of filler primer. Not because of the sculpt being bad or anything, but I kept fucking up. And so I did need quite a bit of it to correct my mistakes. And I think that's looking pretty good. I think we're almost done with this for now. And when I say done with this, I mean like done adding filler primer, and we have to let it sit, and then we can start working on it. And I think it's almost dry enough that I might start taking some sandpaper to it. I think I'll go grab some and we can see where we're at. I think when you're using such a small amount, it does tend to dry a little quick, and we're working it in quite a bit. So yes, most of this is starting to dry up really nicely. Who knows, maybe tonight we'll see a primed, not finished, but a primed Blurrg on Ox. That one seam I'm not happy with, so let me try to go back over it again. I think this one I'm going to leave a bit excessive. That way we can definitely tone that down with sandpaper. But yeah, it's coming along pretty good. So that's where we're at so far. There is a few spots that I need to touch up with sandpaper, but I'll go grab some and we'll see if we can maybe start working on this a little bit. So let's clean off again all this dust. We'll switch gloves and then we will start sanding. So let's throw this away and we'll be right back. All right. What a day. It's a rainy day down here in San Antonio, and it is awful. So we've been going for about 30 minutes. We probably won't go for too much longer. This was a pretty short day of hobbying, but I'm glad that we got to do the hobbying. Get these gloves on. And that way we don't die. So the sandpaper we're using is 320 grit. And I don't want to wet sand because we just put this on there and it will pretty much come off if we do the wet sanding. But I just want to give this a real quick once over. Let's pick this up a little bit. Just to see what we're working with. I think that seam we'll have to touch it up with more filler. this one probably a little bit more. And we'll let this completely dry, then we'll prime. And the action of priming will reveal what... so for sure I need to put some right there before I prime it. Just to fill that haunch. I think that's what it's called, the haunch. So we'll put some right there. And we'll let it dry. And we'll come in and sand it off here in a second. Yeah, this stuff is really remarkable. There was a few occasions that I used it on the dead mouse head that when I put it on, I was like, there's no way this is going to work. And I was pleasantly surprised with the result on more than a few occasions on that. And again, it's nothing to do with the print. It's just, you know, I would get myself in a little bit of a bad spot with over sanding or, you know, something like that. And then it would come in and save my butt. It's good stuff. And you can pretty much get it anywhere. You can get it at Walmart. You can get it. I will need to sculpt something on here on this little saddle holder thing, but I'm not too concerned about that right now. That might need to be done in Sculpey because that is something that's a little bit needs a little bit more firmness. I'm noticing here there's a little bit of a break in the wrist. That's probably from when it tipped over on the shelf. So let's see if we can fix that up real quick. So we're using gel super glue, and we're just gonna get a squeeze of it if I can. There we go. We're just gonna put that in there. And we're going to close it, and we'll hold that for a second. And this arm, I will resculpt it a little bit. Okay, so that's good. Specifically like this nail here, I think it escaped the cleanup portion of the build when I cleaned up a lot of those things, but yeah, it's coming along pretty good. This seam is still there, it's still present, but a lot of the other ones seem to have gone away. Let's see if we can put a little bit more super glue on there. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like Gorilla Glue, when you get down to the last like bit of any bottle, I feel like it just stops working. I don't know. Maybe that's just me being weird, but I feel like I can never get like the last 10% to stick. And of course the gloves are sticking, but I mean like actual parts, like functional usage of that. So I'm gonna let that chill for a second. Let's get a little bit more of this filler here and fill this armpit again with a second coat. And I think this is a good stopping point for today. Like I said, a lot of this needs to dry more before we can really attempt to add anything else. See, there it goes. And I do want to get some pin on this to keep it glued down. But for those of you that tuned in or that will tune in the future, thank you guys so much. Hopefully you enjoyed this joy of hobbing. We're working on this Blurrg. We're making him look nice and pretty. And this will take a few more coats of filler and sander and sanding and priming and the like. But I think when we're done, it's going to look pretty good. So thank you guys again for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you like this show, tune in about 3:30 Central Standard Time, Only Fools and Collecting. Our English show will be coming on for their fortnight show. Every fortnight they record. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy their show. Hopefully they have a good show. And we'll catch you on the next episode of The Joy of Hobbing.